Jordan, hey, congratulations on your new film, Before Dawn.
Thank you.
I just certainly love these war movies. It's always a guilty pleasure watching them like on Friday and Saturday night. So tell us where the original idea came from for Before Dawn.
So it was in high school. I read these diaries at a local war museum. So got to go and visit this war museum. Got to read these diaries, and the one of the curators there saw that I had a fascination with actually reading the diaries, where everyone else kind of like, oh yeah, cool, and walked off. So then I got to read these other diaries that they had in storage, and one thing led to another. Speaking with other museums, and I got to read about all these events, but from different perspectives, from the various Anzacs, from the nurses through to the soldiers, through the generals, etc. So, and then I went away and started speaking to people, going, oh, World War One, and everyone in Australia would go, oh yeah, Gallipoli. It's like, well, no, the Anzacs actually fought 3.5 years after Gallipoli, and some of Australia's greatest military victories were in World War One. And so that was kind of for me a driving force, that there was this lack of awareness. And when I started speaking to international sales agents and distributors and whatnot, some of them were like, yeah, there's not a lot of World War One films out there. Not a lot of people actually know the stories in World War One. And so with Before Dawn, I wanted to tell something that was quite epic, but actually on an individual scale. It was about those relationships between and the actual individual conflicts that those characters, or those men and women, had back then.
Absolutely, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's not a lot of World War One movies, but if I do think of a World War One movie, it's All Quiet on the Western Front. Did that
Yeah.
film kind of influence you at all?
Yeah, look, it didn't. It's funny because the film's been remade quite a few times, right? And I grew up in the wrong era. Like I grew up watching Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, John Wayne, like all the old school films. I love the ensemble cast, and so for me, it's the original All Quiet on the Western Front. It was that original, like how they were, like it was almost like, because they didn't have the technology to do anything CGI back then. I prefer not doing CGI, which is also why we let off $1.4 million and caused an earthquake. There was $1.4 million worth of explosives, 2.8 on the Richter scale, which was all above board, but we didn't expect it to go, that big a bang. But I wanted everything to be real. I wanted it to feel like you're actually there. And the one thing with that film, All Quiet on the Western Front, the original, because they didn't have the technology to do the CGI, to do all the big stuff, you always felt like you were there. And the other thing, like your films like Magnificent Seven or Great Escape, you're always there in those scenes with the characters. It's like The Great Escape. You're walking around essentially watching the characters, but you feel like you're actually in that prison camp. And that's what we wanted to do with Before Dawn. Is it was like, okay, I want to actually be in that trench. I want to be in there. I want the close-ups. I want to feel claustrophobia. I want to almost like go, okay, this is something that all I want to do is get out of here. In fact, the premiere night, I had some people walk up and they were like, "Oh, I feel like I'm covered in mud and I feel cold and wet." And I'm like, "Yes, that's what we wanted," And then there were other people that were crying because they went on this emotional roller coaster. So, being able to actually have these sets built on such a large and epic scale was great for epic shots that we needed. And that shot that I've got when we come out of the trench and we almost look down as a god's bird's eye view, was to almost show they're like ants running up a hill, how pointless it was. But let's just do that once, because the rest of the time I want to be in that trench with them. I want to feel what they would have been feeling through that journey, and try and put, almost try and imagine what it would have actually been like back then.
I'm surprised that you took that route, because this is I want to say your sophomore feature film. A lot of people who's in their second film, they would want to use CGI. Wouldn't that be faster
Yeah.
production wise?
No, I've always been look, again, influenced, I guess, by the older movies, is the fact that you can sit down and go and watch an older movie, and yes, okay, look, some of the acting might be a bit hit and miss at times, because we've advanced with acting, as everything advances, but you can still sit there and watch it. Where there's some films now that you'll sit there and go, oh, that CGI is really bad, but yet 2 years ago it was fantastic, and I was fine with it, but it hasn't aged very well, or it's just that CGI is, and computer graphics and everything is just going on such a fast rate that it's very quickly for something to be outdated. And a film like this, any filmmaker wants their film to last forever, without that goes without saying. But um, with Before Dawn, because of the story, I want it so that way people down the track. So in fact, 3-4 years from now, we've got it screening in the education departments. So we don't want to have teenagers there who go and watch your superhero films that see CGI that will be up to date, then sit there and go, oh, that CGI doesn't look any good, because they wouldn't know any better. But it's actually being able to sit there and go, oh, well, actually, we're watching a story here and everything looks real. But even the sets, like I'm a strong believer as a director that if you cast correctly, half of your job is done. And my DOP, he turned around and said a similar thing. He goes, look at what's being built. He goes, this is a dream. Everything is here. So it was remarkable. It was a really hard shoot, but the fact that it was cold, it was wet, it was muddy, it really felt like you were there. Half of the job was done for the cast even. So half the time they weren't acting exhausted, they were exhausted.
I'm curious, how large of a space did you need for this production set, and how did you manage to get all this water? Wait, was this all in Australia? I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah, so it was. So in fact, there's a doco that comes out in the making of this July 5th, and they kind of do a good couple like drone shots of the scale of it. But to give you an idea, Mezin's Ridge, that battle scene was about 80 acres. So it was hundreds and hundreds of acres that we used, because even the background, like the background area, it was a farm, and we used various parts. And I remember going to that farm and meeting the farmer for the first time. He goes, oh yeah, you can use this area. How much do you need? I said, as far as the eye can see that way, as far as the eye can see that way, we need all of this. Oh, and by the way, this is just for one of our film sets. I also need this like another 3 or 4 times. What else have you got? And then there was areas where we would film, but the background was just green. And normally he would put crop there. Well, unfortunately, you can't put crop. We just needed to look like a green rolling hill. That's it. So when we say it was hundreds of acres, because there was also the background as well that we needed for the background set. So everything looks real, and then of course having being able to dig those sets, and then COVID hit, we had to postpone for a few months, but that was also in a way actually worked in our favor, because then the set started to erode. It started looking like it had been hand dug, not machinery dug. So everything kind of just fell into place, and we went from there. And then we ended up filming in the coldest and wettest winter on record. So we were freezing, it was always raining, perfect conditions for what we needed to look like on screen. But it was. So when you see the rain, it's like it's real rain. We did have a rain machine, which we used one of the days, and then decided actually we're not going to use it now. But like the water, there was actually a dam at the back. We even had to, building the trenches, you also had to look at the runoff. So it wasn't just like, oh, let's dig, because otherwise it would just be the amount of rain that you'd get, they'd just fill up like a dam. So we had to work. Luckily, this was on a hill, a bit like how the battles were. And then right at the end, we had a dozer that went through and pushed a 10 by 100 meter drainage system. And that was then, we found that was filling up. So we had to get the dozer in and push that out into the lake and out, so it was quite it wasn't just like, oh, let's just dig some trenches and see how we go. It was almost like an engineering, an engineering phenomenon that we were kind of like doing down there by building these trenches.
Well, you thought of everything. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question. This might be a tough question for you, but I'm always curious, especially towards war movies, is when everybody wears the same uniform in the same battlefield in the same mud. Were there any concerns of like identifying who's who on the battlefield, and you don't end up like I guess like a famous movie that they try to solve was like Black Hawk Down, because there's so many different soldiers that they had to put everyone's names on their helmets, which doesn't happen in real war. But were there any concerns
Exactly.
for you as a filmmaker?
I think, I guess going back to the ensemble cast, that was something that we thought of earlier on, and I got all their headshots and I put them all on the wall, and then actually go, okay, are they all complementing each other? But also, he's standing out because he's taller. That's the sergeant and the way his character is, and Levi, for instance, cast him because I knew that we were going to get close-ups of flares and having the piercing blue eyes, and so being able and having the different looks. So there was already, I guess, subconsciously thinking about that and how not only they were complementing each other, but how they were going to individually stand out. But then also the scene where they're running up the hill and coming out of that trench, and then you don't know who's who. That was good because I wanted it to show, well, this is actually really pointless. There's a whole bunch of people. We don't know who's who right now and how big this is. And the stories we're telling, these individual stories, well, they're just little speck. And imagine all the other sections of that battalion and how many other little stories there are within that. And we're just showing this little part here. So I guess there wasn't necessarily concern once we got on set because everybody did look different. But the extras on the other hand, well, they kind of did blend in. In fact, my old man one day was on set as an extra, and I called action, and these extras are meant to get up and then charge, and a pyro goes off, and we go action, and this one extra was taking forever to kind of like get up, and I go, so I mentioned it quietly, and then went down to the third AD, I think it was, who was going to go out. So the third AD came up to me directly and was like, "Oh, I think you should go and tell that extra that they need to get up quicker." I was like, "Oh, okay." I walk over, and then next look, and the slouch hat lifts up, and it's my old man under the slouch hat. I'm like, "Oh, that's why." That makes sense now. So he goes, "Oh, I thought I'd just kind of sneak in and get it." And I said, "Well, you kind of." I don't know if you kind of really, you need to kind of get up a bit faster. All right, well, I'll just start halfway up, because he's in his 50s. But yeah, so there was, and that's what I mean. We were very, very family orientated on set, and we had a lot of good fun, had a bit of laugh, but also at the same time going, okay, but this is a serious story we need to tell. But yeah, I think we were very lucky. It was just little things like Sergeant Beaufort would wear a slouch hat more often. So, we'd have Tim's character, Big Tooth, the way that he would always kind of act. It was a bit more kind of out there and charismatic. And so just having little things like that, I think really added to that value and that pop of them kind of standing out individually. But at the same time, also molding them together as this unit, this ensemble cast. So, yeah, hats off definitely to the actors because they definitely brought a lot to that for them standing out individually.
Well, hats off for you for pulling off a World War I movie as your second movie. So I can't wait to talk to you again to see what your third movie is gonna come out as, because now you raised the bar on yourself. That's all I could say.
Oh no. Well, I looked at had someone the other day goes, "Oh, just think now that you've done Before Dawn, everything will be easy." And I'm going, "Well, by the way, this is the next film we're doing." And then they all were, "Oh, okay, yep, all right, so this is going to be bigger and greater and all that again." So we announced that one shortly as well, but we've already started working on that one. So yeah, it's exciting times ahead.
That is certainly exciting. Then I can't wait to speak to you again. Thank you very much, Jordon, for speaking to us.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it. See you.